Welcome to the Quiet Strength Podcast, Fathers in a Failing World. I'm Giacomo Knox. We live in a time when the role of fathers is often misunderstood, sometimes ignored, and occasionally even ridiculed. Yet throughout history, strong fathers, sometimes loud but often quiet, have held families, communities, and entire civilizations together. This podcast explores that quiet strength. Each episode brings together thoughtful conversations about fatherhood, responsibility, faith, forgiveness, and the challenges men face in raising the next generation. Some of these conversations are inspired by research, history, and emerging technology that helps us explore important new ideas in new ways. This is an independent production, built by people who believe that strong families and strong fathers still matter. As the show grows, we are always interested in connecting with organizations and partners who want to help us support meaningful conversations about fatherhood and legacy. But at the heart of every episode is a simple question. What does it mean to be a good father in a world that sometimes feels like it's falling apart? This is the Quiet Strength Podcast. Let's begin.
If you walk into a maternity ward today, the pacing fathers in the waiting room aren't just losing sleep. They're like increasingly calculating their retirement funds.
Oh, absolutely. It's a totally different vibe now.
Right, because over the last 40 years, the number of infants born to fathers over the age of 40 is literally more than doubled. It jumped from just 4% to over 10%.
Yeah, that is a massive jump.
It really is. I mean, we are witnessing this massive structural change in how and when we build families.
Well, we are. It's this quiet demographic earthquake, really, because we have this deep-seated cultural image of, the exhausted 20-something new dad.
Oh, totally. The classic stereotype.
Exactly. But the reality on the ground is fundamentally graying. And what we are doing in this deep dive is peeling back the layers of that shift to see the lived reality.
Right, because we've got a really interesting stack of sources today.
We do. We're looking at a cross-section of data spanning massive university medical studies like Stanford and Rutgers, deeply researched sociological fieldwork, specifically a PhD thesis on this, and some incredibly raw first-hand accounts from older fathers themselves, from places like Reddit, Parenting Now, Fatherly, and the Natural Parent magazine.
Yeah, and the mission here is to really get past the sensational headlines, to understand what this actually means for you, for the people around you, and just for society at large.
Right, because the biological, emotional, and social impacts of men starting families in their 40s and 50s, it reshapes the entire experience of raising a human being.
It really does. Okay, let's unpack this, because to grasp the social reality of the older dad, you really have to start with the cellular reality.
Yeah, you have to look at the biology first.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there is a very pervasive, very old myth that needs dismantling right out of the gate, which is the idea that only women have a biological clock.
Oh, yeah. The clinical data completely upends that narrative. Men definitely have a ticking biological clock, too. The medical community generally defines advanced paternal age as beginning somewhere between 35 and 40.
35? Wow, that early.
Yeah, 35 to 40. And much like the way human beings lose bone density or muscle mass as we age, sperm essentially loses its fitness over time.
Fitness. That's an interesting way to put it.
Right. And researchers looking at decades of birth records have been able to quantify exactly what that loss of fitness looks like on a microscopic level.
And they put some really startling numbers to it. When you look at the Stanford data on over 40 million live births.
40 million, just a massive study.
Massive. The underlying mechanism becomes very clear. For every single year a man ages, he accumulates, on average, 2 new mutations in the DNA of his sperm.
Just a slow, steady, inevitable accumulation of microscopic errors.
Exactly. And those accumulated mutations carry really tangible clinical outcomes. The medical records from Rutgers and Stanford show that compared to fathers in their 20s and early 30s, men 45 and older are 14% more likely to have a child born prematurely.
14%?
Yeah. And if you look at fathers who are 50 or older, the infant is 28% more likely to require admission to the neonatal intensive care unit, the NICU.
Right, which is terrifying for any parent. But the impact isn't just limited to the infant either. This completely reshapes how we view pregnancy itself.
Oh, for sure.
The research shows that partners of men over 45 are 28% more likely to develop gestational diabetes.
That blew my mind. It completely rewrites the narrative of maternal responsibility. Paternal genetics are actively dictating maternal metabolic health during the pregnancy.
It's wild. And the underlying mechanics of that are fascinating. It has everything to do with the placenta.
Right, because the placenta is basically a fetal organ.
Exactly. It's formed from both maternal and paternal genetics. So if the paternal DNA carries a higher load of age-related mutations, it can fundamentally alter how the placenta develops and functions.
Which makes sense.
Yeah, and a less efficient placenta places immense metabolic stress on the mother, directly impacting her body's ability to regulate blood sugar.
Okay, I do think we need to pump the brakes for a second, though.
Yeah, fair enough.
Because if you are an older dad listening to this, hearing about a 28% increase in NICU admissions or gestational diabetes sounds like a reason to just panic. It sounds terrifying.
Oh, it really does.
But the researchers themselves caution against looking at this data in a vacuum. You have to understand the difference between absolute risk and relative risk.
Right. It is the most important distinction in medical statistics.
They frame it using a lottery ticket analogy to keep the numbers grounded, right?
Yeah, the Stanford researchers said if you buy 2 lottery tickets instead of 1, your chances of winning technically double. That is a 100% relative increase in your odds.
But your absolute chance of winning the lottery is still practically zero.
Exactly.
The baseline risk was so incredibly low to begin with that a 28% increase on a fraction of a percent is still, well, a fraction of a percent.
Right. It's not a guarantee that things will go wrong.
Not at all. I like to visualize it like saving a document on a computer versus making a photocopy of a photocopy over decades. With the photocopy, tiny errors naturally accumulate over time. That is the DNA mutation taking place. But the final picture you're looking at is usually still totally legible.
That's a great analogy. The medical consensus is really just that this data serves as informational ammunition.
Informational ammunition. I like that.
Yeah, it's meant to help you plan your prenatal care. It's not a reason to drastically change your life plans or abandon the idea of fatherhood out of pure fear.
Exactly.
But what's fascinating here is that biological baseline dictates a slowly degrading cellular reality, right? But what does that actually mean when the baby arrives?
Oh, man. The physical toll.
Yeah. The science tells us there is an aging body, but the personal accounts from these fathers tell us what that body actually feels like when it's trying to lift a squirming toddler out of a car seat on 3 hours of sleep.
It's brutal.
You transition from microscopic DNA mutations to the brutal, practical reality of a 50-year-old lower back.
And the personal essays and community forums we looked at on Reddit and Fatherly are incredibly relatable on this front. And honestly, they lean heavily into the humor of the situation.
They kind of have to, right?
They do. The physical toll is the universal unifier for these guys. Like, one expectant dad on Reddit bluntly advised his peers to get in the gym immediately because, quote, your back will take a beating.
Yep.
Another father joked that any exercise routine you can perform with free weights can easily be substituted with infants.
It's so true. And the juxtaposition between their lives and the lives of younger fathers is just stark. There's this one writer in the Fatherly article who had his daughter at 46, and he was writing about his experience at age 52.
Oh, yeah, his list of ailments.
Right. He paints a very vivid picture. While other younger dads at the playground are talking about scaling cliffs or doing 30-mile bike rides before work, he bluntly lists his own daily realities. Gout, cataracts, missing teeth, and a desperate need for 2 naps a day.
2 naps a day while chasing a 7-year-old. I mean, wow.
It's a lot. He's trying to manage all of that systemic physical decline while dealing with wildly energetic youth.
And that physical decline is something they feel in their joints.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a whole other layer to this when they step out of the house. That aging body becomes a public spectacle.
Yeah, the sociological aspect.
Right. Sociologists studying this demographic shift, like in the PhD thesis we reviewed by Christopher Paul Challoner, spent a lot of time on this concept of physicality in fatherhood, particularly this phenomenon known as the granddad error.
Ah, the granddad error. This is the social friction of being out in public with your child and having a well-meaning stranger compliment you on your beautiful grandchild.
Oof. Yeah.
For many men, this is a moment of acute anxiety. It highlights their physical decline in a public forum and makes them feel completely out of step with the normative parenting timeline society expects. It reinforces the idea that their biology is out of sync with their biography.
But I have to ask, is it really a deep psychological trauma, though, or just a minor annoyance?
That's a good question.
Because when you dig into the community discussions, the fear of the granddad error seems much larger than the reality of it. Like, there is a father on Reddit who goes by normal dad. He had twins at 44, and he explicitly addressed this anxiety.
Oh, right. I remember his post.
Yeah, he pointed out that he was only mistaken for a granddad twice in his kids' entire lives. Once by a very elderly gentleman, and once by a very young child.
That's really not that bad.
It's not. His takeaway was that 40-something dads are so incredibly common in urban and suburban environments today that most people don't even blink. You aren't sticking out like a sore thumb the way you might have in, like, 1980.
That makes total sense. The demographic norms are definitely shifting the Overton window of what a father looks like. As the sheer volume of older fathers increases, the public's social radar adjusts. People are much less likely to automatically assume grandfather when older father is rapidly becoming a statistical norm in their own neighborhoods.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because it brings us to a really beautiful contradiction in all of this.
Okay, lay it on me.
We've established the physical exhaustion, the creaky backs, the mandated naps, the occasional awkward comment at the grocery store. Yet when you read these accounts, these men overwhelmingly report a profound level of fulfillment.
Yeah, they really are.
They routinely state they wouldn't change a single thing about their timeline. So to understand why a guy with gout who is exhausted out of his mind is practically euphoric about his life, we have to look at the psychological mechanics of older fatherhood.
Right. And sociologists point to a massive shift away from traditional models of masculinity. For decades, the dominant cultural model was what Challoner's thesis calls hegemonic masculinity.
Hegemonic masculinity.
Exactly. Think of the mid-20th century father. The primary breadwinner, the stoic provider whose main contribution to the household is financial and whose identity is deeply tied to his career trajectory, often at the direct expense of being physically and emotionally present at home.
The classic Don Draper model, right?
Yeah.
Where domestic life is just this secondary duty happening in the background of a career.
Right. Exactly. But older fathers overwhelmingly reject that model and embrace what sociologists term caring masculinity.
Pairing masculinity.
Yeah, and the mechanism behind this shift is largely about the timeline of ambition. Because these men are having children later in life, they have often already hit their career ceilings or satisfied their early professional ambitions.
That makes so much sense.
They've done the long hours, the networking, the ladder climbing. So when the baby finally arrives, their entire domestic priority has been rewired. The household is no longer a secondary duty. It becomes the primary focus.
There is a beautifully written account in the Natural Parent magazine from a wife who met her husband when he was 50 and she was 21.
Oh, yeah, that was a fascinating read.
It really was. She notes that her husband is completely devoid of career ambition now. He is actively winding down, working toward retirement, and his sole focus is just being a full-time dad. Yeah, he already lived his independent, globe-trotting life in his 20s and 30s, so he doesn't harbor that quiet resentment of feeling like he's missing out on his youth.
Yeah.
He is entirely present because he has nothing left to prove.
And you know, our bodies also facilitate this emotional shift on an endocrine level.
Wait, literally biologically rewiring.
Exactly. The biological rewiring isn't just about degrading sperm, it's about how hormones dictate behavior. As men age, their testosterone levels naturally decline, but what rises in its place is oxytocin.
Oxytocin, the cuddle hormone.
Right. It's the hormone responsible for bonding, empathy, and social connection. As a man enters his 40s and 50s, his rising oxytocin levels biologically prime him to be more nurturing, more prone to physical affection, and more deeply engaged in emotional bonding with an infant.
So their bodies are literally altering their neurochemistry to make them more affectionate parents. That's incredible.
It really is.
And you see the result of that rewiring in how these older dads operate. They refuse to be the stereotypical fun parent who just swoops in on the weekends for playtime. They want to be in the trenches, they want to do the laundry, handle the 2 a.m. feedings, manage the tantrums.
But that level of involvement requires an infrastructure.
Yes, exactly.
Because their old peer groups are entirely out of sync with them, they have to build a new one. The isolation older fathers face is a very real challenge.
Well, for sure.
Their peers from their 20s and 30s have kids who are already graduating high school or leaving for college. Their friends are entering the empty nester phase of life, regaining their freedom, while the older dad is suddenly locked into a decade of rigid nap schedules and preschool germs.
Right. Your college buddies are planning a week-long golf trip, and you are trying to figure out sleep training for a colicky 6-month-old. The disconnect is just massive.
It really is.
So these modern older dads are actively seeking out new communities to survive. There is a great initiative mentioned in the Parenting Now article out in Eugene, Oregon. It's the Well Mama Meetup for Dads and Partners, hosted at Hop Valley Brewing.
I love that example.
It's this brilliant image of intentional community building. You have these guys grabbing a beer, swapping tips on how to be supportive partners, and actively discussing the mechanics of engaged fatherhood. They know they don't have a built-in village, so they're intentionally constructing one.
That's so crucial. But this raises an important question because this profound emotional attachment forces a reckoning with the timeline.
The timeline.
We have established that these older fathers have an incredibly deep, biologically enhanced and psychologically present bond with their children. But when you map that intense bond onto the standard human lifespan, it brings us to the inevitable consequence of delayed parenthood, which is mortality.
This is where the narrative shifts from the humorous complaints about bad backs to something much heavier. The existential weight of their timeline is just the undercurrent of everything they do.
And society certainly reminds them of that timeline. There is a concept called social age deadlines.
This rigid deadlines, okay.
Yeah. When researchers for the European Social Survey polled populations across 25 European countries about the appropriate age to have children, an astonishing 46% of respondents felt that men should absolutely not have children after the age of 45.
That's almost half.
Yeah.
Nearly half the population believes there is a hard societal stop at 45.
Yep.
That is a massive amount of cultural pressure, insisting that having children later in life violates some natural order of things.
It is. But when you read the deeply personal accounts of these older fathers in the PhD thesis and the Fatherly article, you realize that their ultimate fear has nothing to do with societal judgment or social age deadlines.
They don't care about the granddad era.
Exactly. Their singular, overriding fear is leaving their children too soon.
Yeah, that fatherly author confronts this head on. He calls it the ugly truth of his situation.
The ugly truth.
Wait, he actually pulled up the CDC life expectancy charts to look at the actuarial reality of his life. And the math is brutal. According to the data, his daughter will likely lose him before she even turns 30.
Wow.
And because she's an only child, his greatest fear is that she will be left completely alone, trying to navigate her early adulthood while simultaneously caring for an elderly mother without his support or guidance.
That's heavy.
Very heavy. He shared this haunting memory of his own grandfather telling him, when he was in his 20s, you are wasting your youth on yourself. And at 52, looking at his young daughter, the full weight of what his grandfather meant finally hit him.
The existential burden is profound. The father is hyper-aware that he is bringing a child into a world where he will not be present to protect or guide them through their middle adulthood. He is orchestrating a life he will not get to see the end of.
Which forces a very uncomfortable question. So what does this all mean for the child? Is it inherently selfish, as some critics claim?
The critics in the social survey certainly seem to think so.
Are these men doing a disservice to their children by guaranteeing a shorter overlap of their lives? The men wrestling with this reality in our sources have a very compelling answer, though. They argue that they are consciously, purposefully trading the quantity of time they will have with their kids for the absolute quality of time they can provide right now.
It is the ultimate trade-off between lifespan and presence. A younger father may guarantee his child 40 or 50 years of overlap, but how many of those years are spent distracted, stressed, or emotionally absent?
Exactly. Take that same fatherly writer who looked at the CDC charts.
Okay.
He experienced 6 years of abject unemployment during his daughter's early life. If he had been in his 20s or 30s, that unemployment would have destroyed him.
Oh, absolutely. The stress would be unbearable.
He would have been panicked, irritable, and constantly retreating to figure out his career. But as an older father, whose ambition was already tempered, he viewed it differently. Those 6 years perfectly aligned with his daughter's first 6 years of life. He was just there.
Yeah.
He got to climb jungle gyms, be present for every single milestone, and give her a totally emotionally regulated, physically present father. That level of unbroken attention is something a lot of children with young, ambitious dads simply never get.
That's a really powerful reframing. And achieving that level of presence as an older parent requires an incredible amount of self-awareness and strategy. You see this clearly in the advice older fathers pass down to one another.
Oh, yeah.
They know they do not have the boundless, chaotic physical energy of a 25-year-old. They cannot just power through sleep deprivation on sheer physical resilience. They have to outsmart the process.
The Reddit dad who survived having triplets at 41 is the masterclass in this.
Oh, the triplets. I can't even imagine.
Think about the physical toll of triplets at any age, let alone 41. But his advice to new dads wasn't about drinking energy drinks or toughing it out. It was entirely focused on mental management and environmental strategy.
What did he say?
He told new dads to get incredibly organized. He said to read clinical books on soothing techniques, specifically mentioning Dr. Karp's The Happiest Baby on the Block. And above all, to violently manage their own expectations.
Violently manage expectations. That's great.
Yeah. He understood that surviving the newborn phase as an older dad is about managing your mind and your environment, rather than relying on brute physical endurance.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it reinforces the reality that having a healthy, functioning family is a shared biological and emotional burden, regardless of age. This team sport.
The team sport, yeah.
But for the older father, carrying that burden requires immense intentional self-care. It requires seeking out communities like the brewery meetups and communicating openly with their partner about the physical and emotional realities of their age. Their hyper-awareness of their limitations is arguably what transforms them into such deliberate, thoughtful parents.
Right. And for you listening, we've covered immense ground today to understand this shift. We started by looking through the microscope at sperm mutations and navigating the difference between absolute and relative medical risks.
Yeah, the lottery tickets.
Yep. We walked through the physical exhaustion, the achy joints, and the shifting social dynamics of the neighborhood playground. And we ended up uncovering a deeply self-aware, highly nurturing demographic of men who are intentionally trading their physical prime for the gift of absolute emotional presence with their children.
They are actively, quietly reshaping the definition of what masculinity and fatherhood look like in the 21st century.
They really are. And I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over. Something that wasn't explicitly covered in the sources, but is the inevitable next step of everything we've explored today.
Oh, okay.
Let's hear it. Right now, our entire societal infrastructure is fundamentally built around the assumption that parents of young children are in their 20s and 30s.
Sure.
The way PTA meetings are scheduled, the intense physical design of local playgrounds, the assumption by employers that parents have the boundless energy to burn the candle at both ends, even the heavy reliance on young, unpaid grandparents for childcare, it all assumes a younger parent.
That's a really good point.
But as the 40-plus dad transforms from a statistical anomaly into the absolute norm, our society is going to hit a structural wall.
Yeah, the physical and social infrastructure of our communities will be forced to adapt to the demographic reality.
Exactly. How will our school systems, our corporate workplaces, and our local communities have to fundamentally redesign themselves to accommodate a world where the parents standing at the school gates aren't drawing from their first paychecks, but are actively calculating their retirement funds?
It is a completely different paradigm for how a community operates.
It really is. So the next time you picture that waiting room in the maternity ward, realize that the graying of the men in that room isn't just a quirky demographic stat. It is the beginning of a profound change in how our entire society functions.
Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. For more information or to become a sponsor, please go to our website at www.newberryfilmworks.com. We'll get right back to you. Stay tuned for the next episode, coming up very, very soon.